So when was there a time that you thought God really used you? I mean, where you knew that God used you to the max, you know?
I was invited to Hampton University for the Elders Preaching Series. And I was like, this must be a mistake. I'm not sure I qualify for the elder part. But anyway, I was invited, and with fear, I took the assignment, and God did an amazing thing of using us in that moment. And as I reflect on it, it was very transparent. I talked about, my meeting with Howard Thurman, how Howard Thurman, Dr. Watson was coming to preach for me, and he happened to be in town with him. And he asked, could I bring a guest? It was just, I said, of course. So he drives up, his wife is there, and then this gentleman, I'm like in awe. I'm in my little country church, 300 seats, and here's Howard Thurman, and he said nothing. Dr. Watson recognized him, of course, and Watson preached. And we went to the office, and I asked Dr. Thurman, what advice would you give a young preacher? And he looks off and finally answers. He says, write these 3 scriptures down. And one was Philippians 1:6, be confident that he that has begun a good work in you will complete it. Then he went to Luke, and talked about he that has put his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit. And then to Revelation, strengthen that which remains. And I talked about that day at Hampton, how all 3 of those texts, came alive, and he said, you'll use them in your journey. And it was just life-changing for me to be able to be confident in the midst of, all this instrument. I'm like, flawed and all this. Be confident that he that has begun, he'll finish it. And I was like, yes. And then later, when I thought about quitting, that text jumped out. He that puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit. And coming from rural North Carolina, I knew what plows were all about and what that meant, to the farmer, and you could cut a straight row if you just keep your eye on that, and then finally, what I had to spend the next 2 or 3 years doing, strengthen that which remains, not to be distracted by what's lost or what could have been or what ought to have been or should have been, but strengthen that which remains. And man, so I have those in the Bible, those, because I took notes and I wrote them down in my Bible. It's just old and ragged now, but on that front page are those 3 scriptures that I still cherish and still live by for my preaching. Yeah, I love it.
In all of the years of our relationship, I've never heard you say that, and I appreciate that. Adds so much flavor and color. And so this Hampton experience, I'm going to ask you one more question relative to that, is what was the response of the audience? I mean, what was so what I'm doing is, of course, that you had a sense that the Holy Spirit fell, and the Holy Spirit fell on the audience. So what was the response?
Oh boy. It was like I was sharing what many of them were feeling. And without exception, I mean, the tears that people came up to me, and one guy, a pastor in another state, had just taken leave because of mental pressures and breakdowns. And he said, when I quoted that Revelation passage, strengthen that which remains, when I talked about Paul being confident that he'll complete it and not you, but there was pandemonium. It was moments of rejoicing and it was just overwhelming. I mean, in terms of the people, But also for me, it was so much a sigh of relief, I suppose, and that I had done what God told me to do, and that it was helpful for that community of 10,000 folk in there who just shouted and shouted and shouted, and verbally and physically, but as much as taking so much time to get out of that building, from people walking up and just touching me and saying, "You helped me," that sort of thing. Yeah, it was powerful.